You guys, today is the day. I get to teach you the quadratic formula in a song. So we've done a lot of work already. We've solved quadratics with factoring. We've solved quadratics by taking the square root. We've completed the square. And a long time ago, we solved literal equations for any of the given variables. We're going to use all of that today because today our objective is we'll memorize and apply the quadratic formula to find the solutions to any quadratic equation. Here's how we're going to get there. First, we're going to simplify some radicals. That means simplifying square root expressions. Then we're going to transform some literal equations. Then I'm going to show you where the quadratic formula came from. And then you're going to apply the quadratic formula to solve some problems. You're going to practice for the rest of the time. Most of the time, when we use the quadratic formula, we're going to end up with something under a square root sign. I'm going to show you very quickly how to simplify one of those expressions. Now let's say I want to simplify the square root of 45. What I need to do is I need to look for a square number that's a factor of 45. The square numbers are 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and so on, but 9 is a factor of 45. So I'm going to rewrite 45 as 9 times 9, 18, 20, times 5. That's 9 times 5. What I can then do is I can rewrite this expression as the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. Now you might be wondering, can you do that? Is that equivalent? And the answer is yes, it is. So the square root of 9 I can then rewrite, that's 3. Times the square root of 5. And now I'm done. I've simplified the square root of 45 by finding a square factor, in this case 9, rewriting what was inside the radical, that's the square root symbol, and then separating it into its parts, square root of 9 times square root of 5, simplifying the square root to get 3 square root of 5. With some practice, you'll definitely get this. Speaking of practice, I'm going to send you into Desmos right now, but first let me show you what you're going to be doing in there. Your job is to drag the cards that line up with the other cards. So if I think that 98 is 49 times 2, and thus the square root of 98 is the square root of 49 times 2, I'm going to drag that here. You'll notice there should be 3 cards in each group, so one of these other cards is going to be equivalent to what I put here. Okay. Once you have all of those in groups, you're going to go to the next screen. The next screen has the same thing, except now there's some fractions involved, so it'll be a little more complex. Then you're going to go on and just get a quick reminder about literal equations. So here you're going to try to solve this equation for A. If you get stuck, the next slide has a short video that will explain a different example. Then you're going to come back here. Now the reason that we just reviewed literal equations is because to understand where the quadratic formula came from, you need to understand that we're basically just solving a literal equation when we don't know A or B or C, and we still want to solve for X. That's where the formula is going to come from. Now I'm going to show you in just a second how we came up with it. It's a long process that starts with trying to complete the square without knowing A, B, and C, and so we leave those as variables. You don't need to memorize how this is done, but you do need to memorize the formula. So as soon as you watch the video showing you how we came up with a quadratic formula, you're going to watch another short video that's going to teach you the song. I don't need you to memorize the process to come up with the quadratic formula, but when you watch the video with the song, I do need you to memorize the quadratic formula. Here's how we use completing the square with any A, B, and C to try to figure out what the value of X is. This is how we come up with the quadratic formula. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get X squared with a coefficient of 1. We're going to do that by dividing everything here by A. When we do that, we get X squared plus B over AX plus C over A equals 0. We're now going to subtract C over A so we can get just X squared plus B over AX by itself on the left side of the equation. That will allow us to complete the square. So we have X squared plus B over AX equals negative C over A because we subtracted it. Now, let's complete the square. So we know that we're going to end up with X plus half of this term squared. Half of B over A is B over 2A, and I'm going to write over here on the side what that's going to equal to. X plus B over 2A squared, that's what we're going to end up with, equals x squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a squared is b squared over 2 times 2 is 4, a times a is a squared. B squared over 4a squared. Just like that. It's a little complicated. If that's what we want, then on the left, we're going to have to add this missing term because we don't have that over here yet. So we're going to do x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared equals, but what we added to the left, in order to make this still equivalent, we have to add to the right. So we have negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. We're going to rewrite what's on the left as what we knew we wanted, x plus b over 2a squared equals all of this. Now I could keep it like that, but the issue is we have the opportunity for a common denominator. We can't just add c plus b squared over a plus, we can't do that. That's not how fractions work. But we could multiply this term here by 4a over 4a to get a denominator of 4a squared. So let's do that. Minus c times 4a, I'm going to write that as 4ac to be alphabetical, over, we don't need to, but we will, over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Now I can add these two terms together, and I'm going to do that. But I'm going to write the b term first, b squared minus 4ac. I don't have to, but I could, and I will, over 4a squared. So x plus b over 2a, quantity squared, equals all of that. Now we have something squared equals something. We know how to deal with that. We've been doing that in the last few lessons. So we can take the square root of both sides, and then this thing inside here is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of all that. So let's write that. X plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 4a squared. Now you might notice that 4a squared is equal to 2a times 2a, also known as 2a quantity squared. 2a quantity squared, when we take the square root of it, we just get 2a. So we can rewrite the denominator here as 2a quantity squared, and then take the square root. X plus b over 2a equals plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over, not the square root of, but over 2a. From there, we know we're going to have two solutions. Either this is equal to positive square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, or it's equal to negative b squared minus 4a, square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. We're going to leave it as plus or minus, and when we go to subtract b over 2a, we get x equals, we subtract b over 2a from both solutions, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now we have a common denominator, and so we can write this as x equals minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. And that, my friends, is how we get the quadratic formula.
Ooh, that was a lot. All right, you don't need to memorize that process, but I needed you to see it so that you can see how we came up with this formula that you're going to be able to use in any quadratic equation ever for the rest of your life. I'm going to send you into Desmos, but first let me show what to do in there. The next slide is going to show you the song. You'll need to enable the sound and then play it.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root.
Oh my God, it's so good. All right, next, you're going to go to the next slide and you're going to write it twice using the sketch tool. X equals, and you can go back and watch the video again as many times as you need to. Then you're going to choose the correct form of the quadratic equation from the list. And then in order to apply it, you need to be able to identify a, b, and c by writing an equation in standard form and identifying the a, the b, and the c. So here, one of these cards has a equals, what would it be? This would be negative 1. So that card is going to go here, right on top of it. Now negative x squared minus 3x. Minus 3 would be either b or c. It's up to you. One of those is right. You need to pick the right one.
And then for c, now remember you need to rewrite this as negative x squared minus 3x plus something equals 0, so you probably need to add something to both sides to figure out c. I'll let you do that. From there, you're going to go to the next slide, and you're going to finally apply the quadratic formula to solve this equation. Identify a, b, and c, plug them into the formula, find the answer. And you can either show your work here by sketching, a equals 4, plugging it all in, or you can take a picture of your work and then upload it by pressing here, go into image, and uploading your file. You'll do the same on the next slide and on the next slide, and then you'll be done. And that's it. Now you're going to know the quadratic formula. You'll join the ranks of every student who has ever taken algebra, who has memorized this formula. You'll be able to brag to everybody you know, humbly of course. More importantly, you'll be able to solve any quadratic equation that's put in front of you. Go have some fun with it. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.